do that.
No.
Hello, everybody. Hello. This is Kirsten Winkler. I'm the founder of EduQuest. With me, as always, our appreciated, reliable editor.
Reliable, I don't know.
Mr. Christopher Dawson. Chris, great to see you again, and hope you had some quiet days with the family. How's everything going?
Things are going pretty well. I'm learning to plumb, so I'm replacing the heating system in my house because it's cold here and it died. So instead of paying a plumber, I Googled it. So we'll see how that goes. But that's my latest hobby is plumbing, plumbing and carpentry. If the education writing thing doesn't work out,
you can still go in the manual. Well, but I mean, we can say that. Craftsmen, I think as less and less people probably have these skills, you can make a good living. Actually, what I see around here in France, they earn some good money.
Yes, they do. You can at least save yourself a lot of money. So that's the big goal here is if I get handy. You get awful handy when you kind of run out of money. So,
And of course, that's also related to learning. I mean, speaking, not yet, but in our review, speaking about open educational resources, I mean, you said you Googled that, so maybe watch some videos as well, and you can learn how to repair your car or replace your heating system. Why not? What better way to start of the new year than with our review of last year. So this review ad is going to be Chris and my look at the big stories of 2012, what we liked, what we noticed, of course, stories and companies or movements that got a lot of press, and whether we think they are going to stay or maybe not. So Chris, did you take these days during or between Christmas and the New Year to sort of think about stories or education or your year? I don't know. What have you been up to?
Yeah, I have been kind of pondering that, and usually for ZDNet, I write sort of an end-of-year wrap-up prediction for next year, and I haven't done it yet because there's so many moving parts right now. I mean, we have talked a lot in the past about this sort of edtech bubble, and where's that heading, and what does it mean, and when are we going to see some more great practical applications of all this technology, and what's still percolating around. So that's actually been floating around in my head as I've been redoing my heating system in my house. I'm playing plumber by day and thinking about education by night. This has been one heck of a year, and we're going to talk about kind of month by month. But the amount of money that's been thrown around in edtech is absolutely unprecedented, and I think that, if nothing else, has been something really striking about 2012.
Yeah, so to give our listeners and viewers a little overview, we are definitely going to talk about this edtech bubble and founders on a mission. And then our other big stories, well, I think we cannot avoid talking a little bit about the MOOC movement. And you and I, we at the very beginning, we interviewed the founders of Coursera. Of course, there are more MOOCs than only Coursera. But basically, yes, they are funding, the hype around them, now increasingly MOOC fatigue as well. So I think connected to that also Khan Academy, some backlash on Khan, still going strong, flipped classroom in general, then sort of more funding and so on. Also Pearson buying its future. I think pretty interesting what they have been up to. And in many ways, I have to admit, in quite a smart way compared to many other big companies.
I know. I always want to hate Pearson, and I can't because they keep doing cool things and smart things. And helpful things, and it's not often we see these the 800-pound gorillas, really innovating and being very smart in their acquisitions, and having been part of a broader mission that actually seems to be pretty well focused on education. I struggle with this because there's so many great startups out there, but Pearson just keeps plugging along, doing good stuff. I don't know.
And also a good exit for startups, or when Pearson is not interested in buying, they build it themselves. So pretty smart. And they are sitting on a pile of money. So
that helps.
So then on the tech side of things, of course, tablet wars, iPad mini, iOS versus Android, maybe a little bit of the Arkash, whether it's doomed or not. So many different and contrary stories. Also some interesting things about, even if you don't have a lot of money, things are possible thanks to maybe Startup Weekend EDU, crowdfunding, and learning to code, of course, big topic as well this year. Then the last thing maybe for us as bloggers, also edu-blogging as a business, mainstream and tech and business blogs jumping on the bandwagon of hijacking the space maybe. And we can share some of our experiences maybe and what we had to learn in 2012 as edu-bloggers. Yeah.
I think that there's that is it's very interesting that a lot of companies, private companies, and content companies as well, particularly private companies, are choosing to now use content for lead generation, and it's sort of the de facto marketing, and many of them are actually starting to produce some really good content. Dell is a great example of this. They've launched a few sites that are outstanding, and they're doing wonderful things both in education and in the enterprise in terms of great writing, engaging stories, working with an audience. And, in some cases it's better than sort of these independent outlets. Not that anything's independent anymore, but there's good stuff. There's also a ton of junk. And so getting yourself heard above the noise and outside the echo chamber is becoming a real challenge for writers and for educators who want to share their best practices. It's becoming a little bit more about lead gen and a little less about sharing, I think. But I have a feeling in 2013 we may see that sort of shake out a little bit as people learn who is giving us good stuff and things that we can use, and who is just trying to improve their SEO.
I think you're spot on there. I think what we are going to see in 2013 is definitely many more efforts and, as you said, good stories in this type of content marketing. Big companies and also sort of either partnering, supporting in one way or the other like more education-focused outlets. What we see, the maybe bubblegum approach, and you said staying afloat, and what the average consumer, even in the education space, seems to consume is those 50+ tools of XYZ. What I have my difficulties with, but admittedly, yes, they are easily to digest, whether, or at least many people push retweet immediately. I am not sure whether they even bother to look over the stories or those 50 tools in my example. But yeah, it's easy, it's nicely digestible, and of course far easier than dedicating even 15 or 20 minutes of your valuable time in reading an analytics piece or somebody really defending an opinion or something like this. So I definitely see a lot of this stuff. Whether it's here to stay, I am not sure. As you said, much more is being produced. On the other hand, I don't know if there are really that many original creators. I see a lot of curation going on, and then also, and also in many of the tech blogs, original like edu tech blogs, so not the general blogs, but I see a lot of aggregation, but not creation. And I don't know. Do you think we, as blogger or journalists, maybe in your case, should we focus more on like niche content, or do you think we should go broad? What's your strategy for 2013? As we need one, I feel.
Yeah, no, I do think we need one. I think that part of the issue is that it's easy for us as we sort of live, eat, and breathe this stuff to expect people to have a fairly in-depth bit of background knowledge. So, but if we write something that is deep and thoughtful and really probes an issue, there's very few people out there, especially teachers who are busy teaching, who have any sort of background understanding of what we're talking about. On the other hand, if they can read that, hey, 25 things I can do with my class right now, cool.
Yeah.
And that's, I think it's not so much a matter of them seeing it as bubblegum. I think it gets read because it's what's accessible and easily understood by someone who's not terribly savvy, who's just really trying to get a little bit deeper into this idea of bringing technology into the classroom. You have we can write things that are of great use for the IT folks in education or for people founding businesses in edtech, but they'll read the deeper content. But the millions of teachers out there, not a lot of them are going to dive that deep because they simply don't have the time or the background. And I for myself, I think there's enough people who are talking about the 25 tools or the the sort of simple classroom practices that I can dig a little deeper. And my thinking for 2013 is that it's going to be less of a focus on hardware and a much greater focus on big data, analytics. How are we going to actually start putting these tools into teachers' hands and making them really useful for teachers? I think that's something that teachers, I get emails a lot about people who just don't, they say, big data, there's stuff going on here, there's some tools, we've got our SIS, we have our LMS, but it never all comes together. What do we do? That's where I'd like to take my focus. And I think this idea of a niche, finding something where you have a core audience who needs to know what you have to say and not just sort of an echo chamber, I think that's pretty important.
So we basically should simply accept the fact that our audience is probably core and not very large, and leave the other stuff to other people who make a very good job and successful job in covering such type of things. What do you think?
Exactly.
What do you think about those first things I see about people coming in education and building a blog, newsletter, whatever system and getting funded for that?
I think you're going to see that happen less and less. 2012, we started talking about this. If what you did had anything relating to do with education and technology in it, you probably got some money for it. You maybe found a corporate sponsor, you maybe found someone to actually fund what you do. I think we're going to see a bit less of that, and I think just being able to, any Tom, Dick, and Harry being able to step into this industry, if you will, I think that's going to be a lot harder for folks because it's saturated now, and you need to be putting something out there that people need to know. So I don't think it's going to be quite the free-for-all that it has been.
So you would say that 2012 was sort of the peak of whether we want to call it a hype in education hype or not, but that is going to get calmer in 2013 again. So some of the people might drop out when they are not in for their love or passion for education. Do you think we are getting back to a more normal status?
I think so, and I think we'll also see again some of this dominance from corporate content, and I don't mean that in a bad way. When people have a solution, then they need to talk about that solution. So if a company, SAS or Pearson or whomever, starts coming up with some great tools in a particular area, well, they need to get people thinking about those tools and how to use them. And that's some pretty niche content right there. But it's going to get circulated because they're going to have the SEO and the mojo to make it happen. That's not a bad thing. And I think we'll see more of that, which again leaves less room for Mrs. Smith's fifth grade classroom to talk about, fifth grade stuff.
And you get these things even more than I do, but we both had quite a few interviews and invitations to webinars, for instance, with McGraw-Hill, and I think we had Vineet Madan on and talking about Learn Smart, and I sat in some of their webinars as well. And of course, in November, McGraw-Hill had a big story selling their education section to Apollo for $2.5 billion. Not that Apollo of the University of Phoenix, but another Apollo, as I learned. But definitely one of the big stories. And it would have been actually quite interesting, I think, selling to that Apollo of the University of Phoenix.
Well, of course, when I saw the story originally, I thought the same thing. I thought, wow, University of Phoenix, I worked with them on some separate projects, and it's very clear that if they see something that is interesting, they will very often try and just, instead of purchasing something, they will often just try and redevelop it themselves at a lower cost and more efficiently. And lost a little business that way. But I was not surprised to see they did it. Turns out they didn't do it, as you said, as a different investment group. But I think that we will again continue to see that sort of convergence. We talked about convergence in the consumer space for a long time. I think we're going to see a lot more convergence here, where companies that have something to gain, some of the bigger fish that have something to gain, they're going to go out and buy something useful for them and start putting all these pieces together and developing sort of end-to-end solutions. It's an easy sell for schools, and if you can have a unified set of content and resources. This is something that the Pearson, we've talked about them already, but they're doing a really good job of this, providing a wide range of resources that they have the expertise and the wherewithal to stitch together really well. That's a really easy sell for schools. And when you're in the business of procurement and trying to make things run and just keep the lights on a daily basis, if you can go out and buy one thing and have it do everything you need it to do, or a large chunk of what you need it to do, the temptation is certainly there to not have your teachers be assembling their own resources or using some of these open resources that are out there and going through the legwork of making it happen. So
absolutely, yeah. Pearson is really spreading everywhere beyond, obviously, the content and their omnipresence on all those conferences, but of course also investing in startups or building their own things. And simply, it seems to be very much like what you said. They simply seem to be there and the obvious solution when somebody, a teacher, a school, is looking for a robust system, and of course, one of the big stories, or just recently in December, they acquired 5% of Nook Media with an option of for 5 other percent. And before that, we talked about this in May when Microsoft and Barnes and Noble created Nook Media, and sort of Pearson now. Or I ask you first, and then I give my take. Why do you think it's maybe particularly interesting to get their foot in the door and on that platform?
Well, you've got Nook, you have Windows being and Microsoft being sort of the de facto platform for basic content creation, operating systems, backends. The Nook is an inexpensive device that is becoming a converged device. If you have Microsoft with their Surface, Nook is available. The Nook app has become available ubiquitously. I mean, if this gets done right, and I don't think it will because nothing against Microsoft. I actually like Microsoft products generally, but Microsoft is involved, and so I don't think it's going to get done right. Barnes & Noble has never done anything right in this space, despite having all the right tools in place. They've never put it together. So I don't think this is going to happen. But if you can find the right combination of platform and content, we've said this before, and this story hasn't changed, that's the holy grail. And I think that Pearson is smart to dip their toes in the water, because right now, with Microsoft and with Barnes & Noble, it's really the only sort of partnership with an opening out there. It's not like they could go partner with Amazon. Amazon has kept a pretty tight rein on Kindle. Partnering with Google, probably not going to happen because Google has their own sort of educational thing going on, and Google Apps and lots of other stuff happening. There are book projects which irritate people no end, and so basically Microsoft and Barnes & Noble, they're the only game in town. And if Barnes & Noble is going to go belly up, not that I have any information that it might, but we see how the demise of Borders. I have concerns about the longevity of Barnes & Noble. Well, there's all sorts of stuff there that could be acquired and used quite handily by the right company, like Pearson, who then forges a stronger partnership with Microsoft. All conjecture, but you could see this playing out in a smart way that it couldn't otherwise.
I remember our review ad, and we sort of had the number there. I don't have it on the top of my head, but Nook Media was immediately sort of valued higher than Barnes & Noble itself. So I think with probably, depending on how we see Microsoft's role, but with some smart people sort of driving the car concerning Nook Media, they can probably make a good survival and even become a successful company, or even spin it out
right
without Barnes & Noble, basically.
Well, yeah, I think that's a key. And if we look at what Microsoft has done with Windows 8 and with tablets now, and they're a little late to the game, but they're actually bringing some great stuff to market. And if the latest sort of round of Windows 8 tablets and the growing number of apps that are related to that, Windows remains the platform of choice for sort of everybody. Lots of people like their Macs. That's all well and good, but there's some really compelling things happening around Windows 8, and it remains a platform that's well understood, easily managed in schools. Every IT administrator in a school out there knows how to use Active Directory and the Windows back end of things. So there's some real opportunities there, and I don't think that can be ignored. Especially I don't like to wave our open source flags or shout about OS 10 or Android, whatever. Microsoft is a powerful force in education, and they've actually devoted a lot of time and effort into philanthropic work for education, and I think that has actually increased throughout 2012. I think we'll see it increasing more. Anthony Salcido and I talk pretty frequently, and he's their global head of education, and he's extremely passionate about this stuff and carries that passion back to Microsoft. So there's going to be interesting things happening there. Microsoft is not going by the wayside. They're just a little late to the tablet game, but
absolutely, yeah. So just one last sort of side note. I remember that Pearson also did a content partnership with Newton. So having their content on the platform, and Newton is is selling this for them. So basically being positioned everywhere, and then seeing where the most promising things happen. But let's talk about the big three. So obviously Apple, obviously Google, and with some distance, but still being the third and a little bit late to the game. But never count out Microsoft, I think. Well, I don't have a Surface myself, but it seems to be pretty interesting. And also for the new system, so Windows 8, for the first time in history, I think Windows XP fell under 50% of market penetration. Right. So there's hope that Microsoft.
Yeah, I think people finally have a real reason. I mean, XP is really kind of been deprecated anyway. But Windows 8, Windows 7 was a very nice operating system. Worked fine, came on new computers, whatever.
Everything's better than Vista, I think so.
Exactly. We're all happy to leave that debacle behind. But now Windows 8, you have this touch thing, and everyone wants a tablet. People are tired of carrying around 2 or 3 devices. And I gotta say, Surface, I'm not impressed at all. I think it's a strictly consumer device, and I get irritated whenever I think about the Surface. But when I go and review and check out what OEMs are doing with Windows 8 Pro on tablets and really innovating around hardware and finding ways to bring down costs but have a device that is more than adequate for any sort of content creation that students or teachers or administrators might want to do, now all of a sudden that starts getting pretty interesting. And whether it's based around Intel Atom processors or some of Intel's higher end processors, there's some really cool devices out there. I have a distinct feeling that my next computer probably going to be a tablet that has high-end functionality, and the same could, that's me as sort of an IT professional person, but I think the same could apply to students who maybe they've got a tablet at school because they're doing that through one-to-one, but then at home they have a desktop, and they've got their Xbox and whatever else. A single converged device. We've again talked about this before. A single converged device starts making a whole lot of sense. It's why e-readers are dead in the water.
It definitely makes a whole lot of sense. Do you think this is going... Well, it's probably not going to happen in 2013, but in the coming years, do you think, like, at least us in the developing world, and I mean, you and I, we are creators, so at the moment... I see tablets as a very nice consumption device, and I can do some sort of creation on it. But when I, not for writing really longer pieces, and I tried this a little bit, but even with Google Drive, I cannot really edit this on my smartphone. So on the one hand, we see smartphone screens becoming bigger. I just heard the news that Asus and Acer stopped their netbook production, so I think tablets kicked them out of the space. Totally. There's no need, or at least consumers don't want netbooks anymore, they want tablets. I am not yet at the point that I could do all my work and all my stuff around a tablet. Not yet, but... Right. Maybe. Do you think we are coming to this one unified device, whether it might be a little bit bigger or lighter, so we can make some concessions about some form factors, but we are more or less doing everything, or will be doing everything we need from only one device? Or do you think for us in our society, I don't know, we easily say, yeah, it's expensive, but anyway, let's buy another iPad mini, let's buy another whatever.
Well, Apple, for example, will always have its early adopters and will always have its religiously faithful. And they're going to wait in line for many, many days and get the latest device, whatever that is. But I think actually that the Windows 8 and the new movement in tablets from various OEMs, they're going to bring us these devices because we're already seeing that most of them have some sort of docking station. They have the ability to suddenly turn into a real computer. They have, at the very least, a dual core, like an Atom processor, but many of them have Core i5s, Core i7s, powerful processors. Intel's HD 4000 graphics are outstanding. Dell, for example, it's just an Atom processor on their their 10-inch tablet, the Latitude 10, but because of the graphics and the Wacom digitizer that's built in, and the docking station, for $1,000, much more than an iPad, but much less than a laptop and an iPad and a smartphone and an e-reader. Yeah, I think we're really close. 2013, I think we'll see a lot of people, particularly more in the enterprisey space, really in educational deployments. I think we're going to see devices that they can sort of one device to rule them all, so to speak.
And it was very interesting to see that Microsoft, for the first time in their company's history, they actually built hardware.
Right.
Whether this might be, or at least in this first version, a big success or not, but it's a pretty bold move. On the other hand, also, we are both owners, I think, of the Nexus 4. And Google, on the other hand, then also for the smartphone space, setting the standard what they want to be a Jelly Bean smartphone and what it needs to be capable of, and of course in the States, so we don't have LTE here anyway. We have something similar, but for me it's not really a big flaw of this phone not being fully LTE or I find it actually a pretty nice phone.
It's the best phone I've had so far, and I tend to go through phones like I go through candy. I think that the biggest story in that, though, especially as it relates to the educational space, is that all of a sudden now we've got a device that we bought unlocked, deployed en masse. We want to start talking about students having a device with them all the time. Maybe it doesn't need to be a tablet. Maybe it really should be a device that can be connected to the internet all the time. There's significant implications for something like that for what one-to-one can become. And, if students, I think it'll probably end up being more likely a smaller tablet, something inexpensive, but Google is pushing forward this idea that it doesn't need to come from an OEM specifically. It doesn't need to be tied to a carrier, which I know is less of a deal in Europe, but certainly here in the States, not.
But for me, it was a deal that for $300 I could buy an unlocked phone, a smartphone, and having the newest Android operating system. So it was actually a big part of the buying decision whether to buy an iPhone 5 or not, being, for me, buying the first Android phone, as I think, Android made big steps forward, and I think it's now a mature operating system, and, there's not all this talk about apps anymore. That's now a sort of Microsoft thing. Are there enough apps on the platform and in the store available?
Right. You've got, as long as you have Evernote, you're pretty solid. And, I think if we look at the Nexus 7, for example, that's the sort of device that could be deployed to a whole lot of students very, very quickly, big enough to create content when necessary, perfect for consuming content on a desk, on the train, at home, wherever, inexpensive enough that parents can be part of paying for it, the students can pay for it, that schools can pay for it. I think we are going to see this movement. There will be this divergence, and there has always been this sort of dichotomy between Apple's premium hardware and software, and then a more mainstream sort of hardware and software that the majority of that every man can afford. And I think that is re-emerging. We had this sort of spate of very expensive, very big Android tablets that nobody wanted because they weren't as cool as the iPad that was just as big. Yeah. Now all of a sudden we've got this idea that, hey, maybe students should be able to just, in their backpack with their, a book and a couple textbooks and their pencil and pen, they should be able to toss in a little tablet too, something that's more disposable even than this precious iPad. Whenever I still see, like second graders running around with iPads in a classroom, and it pains me because, one, they don't need it, and two, these things get broken. There's a lot of these things. We've seen some of these early deployments. They get broken really easily. I don't care how strong the Gorilla Glass is. When a third grader gets a hold of one, bad things happen. And I've got enough tablets in my house floating around and enough kids floating around that I watch it firsthand. I think that we're going to see an evolution away from Apple being this de facto educational tablet, one-to-one provider, and now there's going to be a lot of potential providers, many of which may be running Windows because they're easy to manage. We may see them running Android because now they can be had open, unlocked, cheaply, in a variety of form factors, and there will be the Apple schools too, and that's all well and good.
Definitely, because I mean, even with all and all the good things you said and my few points, I mean, with the Mini, although Apple previously said they would never ever build a 7-inch tablet, so but apparently, I mean, they are following the market, or of course trying to be like forward thinking and ahead of us normal consumers, but apparently, at least at the moment, it's what the market wanted, a 7-inch tablet. So
absolutely.
And I mean, the success for the iPad mini is there as well. I personally don't have one yet because it's not yet Retina, but next version. So yeah, so never count them out.
Leave the really low-end tablets like the Akash. I mean, does that? I mean, I'm inclined to believe there is a market for that, but I think they'll be relegated largely, just as OLPC was in the first place, to developing markets, and
I think
for better
so too.
or for worse.
I think so too, although it's a little bit of a pity because I find, well, of course they are all built on Android, one version or the other, usually not yet Jelly Bean, Gingerbread something, maybe a little bit upgraded. I would also think that even for schools in the US or here in Europe, if you want to hand out tablets to whole classes, why does it need to be an iPad, iPad mini, or expensive Android tablet? So why not a $50 Akash? But I don't know, maybe we are too consumer oriented, or we want those big brands maybe, or I don't know really what is the exact.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's really unfortunate because you could get these devices in every kid's hands without any issue. Even Intel's study book, it starts at $200, ruggedized, perfect for students, and the Akash, whether it's ruggedized or not, it's so cheap, who cares? And so students could have access to information readily, and yet as a society, it's not an Apple.
That's something for Africa, for India. Yeah, that's great.
Yes.
Let them also have their tablets.
Right. Yay, it's bridge the digital divide. Good for them. That's so sweet. Yeah, and it's nonsense, and it's a bias that costs taxpayers a lot of money. And the number, the millions of dollars that have been spent already on iPad deployments, when really students are getting on the internet and they're using some apps that relate hopefully to education. That's what these things have been used for traditionally. If you're in a setting, maybe you're in high school and you need a tablet because you want to do content creation, well, great. Go out and buy deploy to the students who are for whom it's relevant. Deploy some high-end Windows 8 tablets and let them do their content creation. That's fine. But en masse, we still. I really sincerely hope that 2013 is a point where it doesn't have to be an Apple, because Apple has this education cachet and they have these spiffy products. I was going to say that Apple makes great stuff.
Undoubtedly, yes.
And my iPad's sitting next to me. That's all well and good, but there's a time and place for everything. And I think the one thing that as we've sort of struggled out of this recession globally, one thing we have at least learned is a little bit more sense of austerity, and so I'm hoping that can carry forward into schools. And they say, look, let's give students what they need to learn in the 21st century, and take away these skills and have instant access to information, learn to process that information, but it doesn't have to be a $500 iPad. It's
great words. Hopefully somebody out there hears them or will hear them. Okay. Also, one of the terms and stories we couldn't avoid this year were the MOOCs, and whether we like them or not, but they were definitely one of the hype words. And well, they got their funding, and of course everybody was talking about, oh, it's so great to learn things for free out there on the internet, and those founders have really a vision, and well, let's include the stories about Khan Academy and so on in this complex here. But for you, Chris, we had the founders of Coursera early on. Was that inspiring? Was that the year of the MOOC for you?
It was not the year of the MOOC for me, because
me neither.
Yeah, a couple of reasons. One, I didn't have a need for it. I'm a pretty good Googler, and I tend to be one to sort of independently seek out information. Mm-hmm. That being said, I think there is a lot of value in opening up the inherent value in opening up education to whomever can attend, and creating these global communities. I think that's great and important, and an important part of what the internet can give us. I think in some ways it's helped legitimize independent education, and I think that's also a very important part of this. You don't necessarily have to get your 4-year degree and a 3-year master's and a few-year doctorate to have a lot of really solid information and be able to be a productive person in your job or whatever you're doing in the world. So anything that helps get past this idea that you must go spend $150,000 on a college education, okay, that's good. It's even, I think, gotten people thinking, along with the recession, it got people thinking, well, I don't need to go to Harvard. I can go to the University of Massachusetts and pay a quarter of that amount and still get a great education and still move on. This whole idea of the MOOC, if you can get an education anywhere, well, then go ahead and get your education anywhere. So there's a lot of value in that, and I think that's an evolving story as we sort of change the way that we look at higher education. MOOCs themselves, though, I think they'll always exist, but I have to wonder if, where these folks are headed in terms of, there's a lot of money been thrown at these businesses. Mm-hmm. How are they going to be monetized? How are they going to, even if they're nonprofits, how are they going to, sustain themselves?
And many of them are for profits, actually. And right. We can already imagine what the upsells are going to be. And Udacity partnered once again with our ubiquitous name Pearson for some testing. We see that Coursera has the upsell currently of job placement, and they had this sort of backlash on their in their terms and conditions that some educator actually took the time and looked through the terms and conditions and how restrictive they are with taking open educational resources and lectures and making them then a Coursera course, which you are not allowed to independently then distribute and use and so on. So these are definitely signs I don't like very much. On the other hand, you mentioned the investors, and as soon as investors are involved, and MOOCs, they are not a new thing. So yes, the term, coining that phrase or term MOOC, okay, that has been a thing of 2012, I think, along with the enthusiasm of the general tech blog, Silicon Valley, and so everything. Also Thrun coming from Google and now doing Udacity, and all of that added to making it MOOC into one of the phenomena of 2012. But rather sooner than later, they definitely have to work on their business models, and so there has definitely, in one way or the other, upsells probably around credentials, testing, somewhat diplomas later on and so on. And I think this is why some of the universities, if we look at what 2U, so formerly Tudor, now do with Semester Online, and that consortium of colleges and universities sort of creating their anti-MOOC and saying we provide high quality education, and we have some courses on one or the other MOOC platform, and this is okay for us. But our quality content and the quality lectures and those limited classes of 20 students and then exchanging with the professors and learning or taking this course online and in the end getting their diploma or certificate and so on. And this has this and that price tag. I think is going to be one of the things of 2013, that probably not only because the MOOCs are really focused on those high-profile universities, and everybody in the mid-section, at the moment you just have cheap or for free or very high priced and high quality. So I think all the colleges in the middle, the solid ones, but not the ones with the big name, they have to think what to do. And probably then, whether you want to call it anti-MOOC or their online program, maybe in cooperation with some of these startup providers like 2U and Semester Online, I think this is what we are going to see increasingly in 2013.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if these MOOC startups can become more of software as a service, and they become a platform for other universities and other educators, I think there's a real opportunity to make solid money there, as well as to do good by providing educational resources en masse. The more they can scale, the better they can serve a lot of universities and a lot of colleges and schools who can then make use of the platform, and I think that's all for the best. I just don't see people throwing quite as much enthusiasm behind taking a class with 150,000 other people. That's I think 2013 in the rest of the web, certainly in Google's web and elsewhere, personalization is the name of the game, and being able to provide at scale and yet automatically provide these sorts of personalized Web 3.0 kinds of things. You're not getting any of that when you have that much scale in a class. And people create sub-communities, and you hear these wonderful, uplifting stories of the girl in Pakistan who got to finish her course, and she was so dedicated. I think those are the exceptions rather than the rule.
Absolutely.
You have a lot of people who are just participating because they are. So I think that we're going to see the opportunity for schools to make what they need of it. I mean, the Structure Canvas, for example, with their course network now, I think they're a good Canvas network, as they call it. Their goal is to be that platform, to scale as far as you want, or just have a really good place to offer your courseware that makes sense and you can personalize and individualize as much as you'd like. Reach as small a number of students or as large a number of students as you want. There's some things that are best shared with millions. There's some things that are best shared with 10.
I think that's a very good example, and we both, but individually, talked with one of the founders, and I mean, I at least asked him whether MOOC is the future of education or online education, and I think they take a more careful approach, but, not tooting the horns is, it gives you a lot of press, but saying we don't know yet what the future of online education is going to look like. So, as you said, in some aspects it might be massive, in some others it might be intimate, and you have this interaction. And having something agnostic, like we also see, for example, in the textbook space, Rafter, having something for everybody, and then we have to organically see in what direction it develops and itself, and we have to see. We are still so early on to predict is it going to be MOOC or what. I would say I would have some hopes, at least for Udacity, looking at Thrun's background, of really seeing what machine learning might bring to the whole process of talking about real adaptive solutions because at the moment, what is adaptiveness for us in the math space? Yes, you have either this pass, or this, so 3 different things, but in the end, the whole class must fit in one of these 3 ways. And then,
exactly.
So this is not yet, I think, what adaptive learning, or maybe, in my opinion, through machine learning and way smarter people than I are working on this stuff, so I can only imagine probably a tiny little bit of that. But of course, the opportunities are really, really promising if we get it right. So...
Well, that's key. There's that personalization, and I've written a lot that everyone needs to have sort of an individual educational plan. Everyone should be treated as special education because everyone learns in a slightly different way. And there's probably, this is where big data comes into the whole thing. This is where this massively parallel computing power that folks like Google can leverage, Amazon, whomever, and really deliver something that is meaningful to every student who participates. And I think that one thing that's going to come out of this is sort of this trickle down of technology, and we're going to see more and more. We're already seeing some pretty good adaptive learning applications. There's some language learning stuff that's quite good. There's literacy, some math applications that are excellent, at least at the K-12 level. But I think that can scale out pretty nicely to things that really help provide individualized resources when either a teacher can't, or if you're actually taking a curriculum independently. It's also interesting with homeschooling, for example. I think homeschooling has lost some of its stigma because people realize there's a lot of great resources available, and as more things like this become available, then people can make their own choices around how they're educated.
And you mentioned the question around this whole MOOC thing, whether these are people on a mission or maybe on a mission to make money. I would still, despite all that backlash in 2012 on Khan Academy, choose Salman Khan as a person on a mission, because I believe, simply looking at the pure and vast numbers, he could have monetized Khan Academy even through Google AdSense for years now. Yes. And they still don't. And I believe they will not do. And I agree with these teachers and educators who sat down and analyzed some of the videos and saying, yes, I agree with you that one person cannot teach every subject equally as well. But on the other hand, I think picking in some of the videos and pointing on and saying this is not good and this is not correct and you could do it better like this, I think that was good, and they took the first step, but they didn't take the second step in creating their own Khan Academy style thing and being on a mission. And it's possible. The tools are out there. It doesn't cost anything. It costs your time. And I'm a little bit disappointed that we don't see more initiatives of teachers and educators sitting down and creating their own thing if they are experts in their space and know how to do some of this stuff better. And I am actually very happy that we have Khan Academy and have all those nice lectures for free.
The whole point of Khan Academy was to address students who weren't learning in their particular context and provide a different context. So when students go and learn from their teacher in a classroom, if the things that he or she says doesn't quite click, well, then now you have another way to go about learning it. And it's always good to have multiple voices. Teachers have a tendency, I certainly did when I was in the classroom, to get stuck in our own way of, we teach the way that we learn. And when only a small fraction of your students learn the same way that you do, you're not going to be reaching them. So unless you are, I've seen truly brilliant teachers who can do a great job of differentiating for 30 students in a classroom. But that's nearly impossible, and it takes the true great teachers to be able to do it. What I've seen happen much more effectively for 99% of the teachers who are out there is to say, look, here's my way of presenting it. Here's 3 different places online where you can go and get some additional explanations, and let's come back tomorrow and let's talk about it. I think that's the evolution of the flipped classroom as well. Is there's of course been a backlash against this idea of the flipped classroom, and now you're doing homework in class. What's this all about? But really, the idea should be that students listen, learn, watch. Okay, now let's come back together. Let's share. Let's synthesize. Do that whole all the higher order stuff together with the guidance of a teacher. And I think that is going to be the continuing evolution as that vision is realized, and it's not just, okay, guys, you're going to watch this 30-minute video tonight, or I recorded my video and tomorrow we'll do our homework together. I mean, I think that's why we saw such a backlash against the flipped classroom in 2012, because it was not used as it was envisioned. And it
exactly. Yeah. I agree with you. People tend to see what's immediately in front of them and not see the bigger picture or the greater vision. And sure, it's sometimes hard when you're so much in your everyday work as a teacher and you don't have maybe all of that time, or, well, forward thinking is also hard. So following one person's vision and seeing how it could actually all fall back and come together is definitely easier to say, there the flipped classroom model is clearly flawed and so on. But once again, we are still at the very beginning. So the first adoptions are never the perfect solution. So we just have to give it some more time.
Exactly, and I hope that we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak, because there's a lot of good there, just as there is with Khan Academy. Is it the be-all to end-all? Can you replace schools by just having students sit and watch YouTube videos all day? No, of course not. Can you provide students with a better supplement than having them just read sections of a textbook? Yes, you can, and you can have great discussions about that. That's the whole point. I mean, and which brings us to this idea of the textbook. It has not died. It seems to refuse to die. I would love to say that 2013 will see it on life support, but I think that's overly optimistic. But this idea of the dead tree textbook, or a PDF of the dead tree textbook on a tablet, which is exactly the same issue and problem, you're still not getting teachers and students creating and thinking and synthesizing and bringing together all this huge variety of wonderful resources that exist, from Khan Academy to Pearson's latest ebook. That's still not happening, and you're still having students read just PDFs, or you're having them look at a section of, maybe if you're lucky, it's got an embedded video. Wonderful.
Yeah, because I think there are a lot of things connected to that, but I mean, how many professors still today simply read their boring PowerPoint slides? So yes. Students are somewhat used to expecting boring lectures and not the multitude of new things that could be incorporated in that. And for me too, it's all very slow, but again, there are too many parties with interests connected to money in not having traditional textbooks die too soon. So. Yeah.
I mean, there's, I think what's interesting is that there's a lot of money to be made by deviating from that. And I call Pearson again on this. Some of their latest efforts around developing books pull together open resources. They pull together chapters of proprietary resources or piece of proprietary resources that an instructor identifies, and they allow this customization for a particular course so that students aren't going out and buying a $150 textbook and they'll read 3 chapters of it.
I agree. It's a very interesting and compelling approach, and hard for startups to jump in on that. And if Pearson says, you can completely customize it, you buy what you want, you can even combine it with your own material or open educational resources. We are here, we understand what you want. Hard to argue that it's not the case and they are bad and you should go for a startup and smaller and more open solution, and it's definitely...
It's very
they are
difficult.
definitely smart.
Yeah, but it is unfortunate that the barriers to enter are so high. I mean, Pearson happens to have a massive library of proprietary content that they can draw from.
Absolutely.
And no startup will ever have that. That's not to say that a startup can't do a great job of assembling the open resources and finding the right contributors to create those resources, but as the folks at Pearson said when they were revealing some of their latest ebook efforts, they said these are now moving targets, and in the past, books have always been sort of a static snapshot. In a couple of years, you write a revision, and that's it. These are now, their authors are no longer just authors. They're ongoing contributors to a body of knowledge, and that's powerful. And that, I think, is where a startup may have an opportunity, because you find the right people with the right body of knowledge in the right niche, and all of a sudden now you have an interesting story.
And of course, the first teachers or independent educators, through crowdfunding and really new possibilities of compared with traditional investment, having opportunities to, even if it's only a small application dedicated to their class or school, who knows, other schools might adopt this, or one big company one day might come along and wants to buy your application or what you've built. So I think the big ones are still dominant and are going to be dominant. On the other hand, or on the other end of the scale, I think it's more democratic, more open, that also when you are not the computer scientist, the engineer, what the big angel investors or even VCs, the founding team, they want to see and they want to put their money in, you can also do something as a small individual educator, whether this is on Kickstarter, or I think for education, Indiegogo, and I mean EduQuest has a partnership with Indiegogo, but I think they are more focused on this. And there are definitely opportunities, or maybe you want to attend, maybe even take part in a startup weekend EDU. They are really showing some growth, and you can at least learn how to present your project, and you can see whether you can motivate other people who a coder or don't know designer and then work with you on something. So I think 2012 has been the year, and increasingly 2013. If people really want to do something, they also can. So all those, yeah.
The most compelling companies we've talked to over the last year and a half have been those that are founded by an educator who has a vision and maybe a bit of technical savvy, but finds the right partners to then sort of bring their vision to reality. And, the focus is the education, not sort of shoehorning a technical solution into a problem that may or may not exist. These teachers come out of education with an actual problem they want to solve, and then they look for technical ways to do it. That's pretty key. I just talked with a company recently. They coincidentally, of course, there was the recent shootings in Newtown, Connecticut. But this company, Share with 911, they've been working on this for a couple of years, but it's founded by a first responder. And he had been a first responder for many, many years. And he said, look, there's not enough communication happening between schools in a situation and those first responders. There's no way to get information easily, and the minutes or even several minutes that it can take to coordinate services and get people in to address a problem, that's the entire Newtown, Connecticut shooting was over in 5 minutes. And so every second counts. So he said, let's figure something out. So he finds a guy who knows how to do this, and they build out an application that allows teachers to share in real time, empowers teachers to do some great things in terms of making something happen. They've solved a problem, and they've used technology for it. The problem came first. The technology came second.
And I think that brings us to some of our predictions for and our outlook for 2013. And yes, I think those sad and tragic happenings in Newtown, I think what we are going to see is a school security arms race, whether this might be in the context of training teachers on weapons, or much better what you said, somebody in the situation seeing where the problem actually is, that the crucial thing was time, and building an application to really solve the problem, because I think guns cannot solve the problem that schools and the teachers are faced with in protecting the children then.
Well, and no matter how many teachers you're training, it will be very difficult for the spate of shootings we've had here in the United States, whether in movie theaters or at malls or at schools. These people are well armed. They're wearing tactical gear. A single teacher with some bravado and a weekend's training with weapons is not going to be able to stop them. They're going to create a larger issue, and being able to deal with this more smartly and proactively rather than reactively and just creating even more violence, I think probably makes a whole lot of sense. And most security experts you're talking to, the knee-jerk reaction is, arm the teachers. You want to keep the kids safe? Arm them. And that's, especially for Americans, we have our Second Amendment here, and that is that's a pretty easy knee-jerk reaction. But a moment's thought, there's a lot of solutions. Some of them technical, some of them non-technical, but I think that there are some powerful roles for technology in doing this smartly in ways that don't turn our schools into prisons, both to keep people out and keep people in. And I think you're right. There will be this arms race, and the challenge will be getting people to come up with really innovative, effective solutions, and not simply have armed guards at every door, or razor wire, or video surveillance with infrared. I mean,
Yeah, here in Europe, so we know that you have your Second Amendment, and for us, the mentality is really difficult to follow how guns should make the country, the schools, safer. And we sort of look at this with really some, not really understanding the motivation, and it seems to be a little bit short-sighted. Yes, maybe the first reaction, hand out guns so that everybody is safer. But as you pointed out, when you think about it, that's totally counterproductive. But on the other hand, probably you read the story as well of this father building the helicopter, the drone flying over his son on his way to the bus station. And so whether these might be applications of surveillance, monitoring something, I think you're right. We are going to see a lot of more efforts in one or the other sense connected to security, and I would probably extend this personal health and health education, as well as one of the other big stories was obesity and what we can do. And with all those analytics and all the studies of being healthier, fit, keeps you motivated, you feel better, and so on, there are less and less justifications of being, I simply want to be lazy, and sort of this whole us being, whether these might be children or even adults, teachers, parents, being more monitored by some sort of device is probably definitely going to happen. And it's for your own good. So who doesn't want to...
It's hard when you start thinking, all of a sudden there's this nanny state, and yet, if some surveillance technology that we have can make us safer, or if some reasonable technology that we have can provide us with feedback about our habits, or our learning can be truly adaptive because it analyzes, how we go about doing things. I mean, yes, you are conceding something there, but you're getting something really big in return. I've argued this about Google for years. Yes, I do give up a fair amount in terms of privacy when I use Google services and when I truly embrace them as I do. But I get back a lot, and I do it in a fully informed, consensual way. That people need to understand what they're doing and getting into, just as a school needs to understand what true video surveillance means in terms of privacy. But they also need to understand what the benefit is. And if even if it's simply, gym classes, you get students hooked up to some sort of monitor, and they can really understand what the effects that their weight or their physical fitness may have on their heart. Well, that seems like not a bad idea. They've got an app to track things they do. Pedometers that hook up to their computers, and all of a sudden, there's cool things to do here that don't have to be massively invasive, but can still make people healthier, safer, smarter. Sometimes the mind boggles at the things that we aren't doing. And I had a security expert point out, as we were talking about the Newtown shootings, we have cameras and databases and computers of the yin-yang that can identify stolen cars as they come through, or cars registered to sex offenders, cars registered to people with weapons permits, people with various convictions, and all that can happen in real time as someone drives into a school into a school setting, and immediately be flagged. Police can be called automatically. Things can happen very quickly if we have the right technology in place. And again, it's not terribly invasive. It's using data that already exists and using these sort of big data approaches, and just technology that's been there for a while now. It just hasn't been embraced.
I agree, and then of course it's the big question. We already see that in our social lives, or maybe social life online, Facebook, in the end now also Instagram towards the end of the year, what we pay with our data. You and I don't know how many people actually and actively think about it or then care about it. We make educated decisions, yes, and if we say, okay, I share this with a service, I always evaluate what is my return, and if the return is bigger, I feel good about it. But I know that it's probably, as soon as it's out there, it is more or less public. So even though the companies, I hope, take good care of my data, and it's anonymous in some ways at least, and but we will see. And I think talking about, so coming to education again, talking about the MOOCs and first tendencies there, I think in 2013 it could actually, if they are not careful with that and they have those huge amounts of data of their 150,000 students taking a class, and what are they going to do with it? Especially getting pressure from investors, maybe, and so on. So getting into this freemium and privacy trap like some of the big social networks or services have encountered this year is quite of a risk, I think.
I agree with you. I mean, the temptation is there. You as these providers know exactly what their students are doing, what they have surfaced on their computers, if they're engaged, if they're not engaged, how fast they type, what else they're surfing for. I mean, it's very easy to collect a whole lot of data. And again, many students in these courses don't realize that or think about it. And you're right. As investors start pushing for returns on things which are sort of inherently charitable, without a very different sort of business model, the temptation will be to start monetizing, and you're going to start seeing typing tutors for those students who type in their chats slowly, and the students who hit too many fingers are going to see diet pills advertised because their fingers are too chubby. I mean, it's all conjecture again, but the possibility is certainly there for it to turn evil, and so far. Google, their "Don't Be Evil" slogan, they've made some privacy screw-ups. They've certainly done some things they shouldn't. They've gotten some hot water with some governments, but yet there's nothing that they've done that they've done things that are stupid and the result of an inexperienced business, not necessarily something that is evil, I don't think. But again, we've got a whole lot of very inexperienced business people now running these services. Will they have the cojones to sort of stand up and say, no, we're going to provide the service, and here's how we're going to do it? So it's a hard thing to say no to the investors who are paying your bills.
And I agree with you. Whether we talk about consumer internet in general or specifically about education, in neither of the two we had that really big story that shook up so many people that there was actually a scandal. I mean, it's the tech people now, and we are discussing this, and of course some other people, so we are definitely not alone, but it's not like average Joe or not even the average teacher. I think you pointed out this very correctly at the beginning, that we are talking about stuff they don't think about or they don't relate to, yeah.
Well, and I also think that's a nice place to wrap up as we think about 2013 is really I think that we're going to see an increasing level of savvy and knowledge among teachers. Teachers are going to begin thinking about this sort of thing because it will simply be more naturally a part of what they do and what they're expected to do. It's so far technology, yes, it filtered into the classroom, but it could be largely ignored if you wanted to ignore it. Not so much going forward, and I think we're pretty much to a point where, especially once you hit 6th, 7th grade, and then certainly into college, this is what it is, and especially the university level. I think the teachers who choose not to use Blackboard or whatever LMS is there, and teachers who don't take emails from their students, or what, I think those days are pretty well behind us.
Mm-hmm. Agree. So as you said, to wrap this up, and I think we kept our audience for 1.5 hours nearly. So do you think education in general, will we see sort of, as we saw a lot of disruption, we talked about the textbook space and innovation as well, and we saw a lot of seed funding, and seed nowadays goes up to $1 million, so which is quite a bit of seed. Do you think this is going to slow down for education in general in 2013, at least in the States, here in Europe as well, that we are going to maybe see a Series A crunch for edtech startups, that they are going to have a difficult time after their seed to raising another round? And I am pretty sure that on the other hand, we are going to hear many more stories and interesting things from emerging countries. And I think that's a good thing. Do you think our, let's call it hype, is going to continue here in our Western world?
I may be a year early on this prediction. I mean, it may take another year for this to shake out. If we look at the big tech bubble of the dot-com boom, it took a couple years for businesses to realize, oh wait, we need a business plan. Oh right, okay. And then the brick and mortar companies sort of re-emerged and refaced themselves with a website. I do think though to some extent we've learned our lesson with that. I think we'll learn a little faster here. I think there's going to be more requirement for not just a return, but for either those philanthropic dollars or seeing that it actually has measurable benefit. And is it research based? Is it just someone's cool idea, or does it have a measurable effect in the classroom? And if there's not a sense that you can get results, and those results are meaningful, both statistically and in the classroom with actual students, I think that it's going to be a little harder to get that money. I don't think it's going to drop off a cliff by any means. But this sort of willy-nilly, everyone who's got a reasonable idea in edtech gets $1 million. And we saw millions and millions of dollars funded, like a lot of millions of dollars funded, like hundreds of millions of dollars funded.
Sure, just picking a story from July, Edmodo itself raised 25 million. I think 2U raised twice in 2012, making a close to 100 million investment. Udemy raised 12 million, Discovery invested 20 million in Learnist and Grokit. I mean...
Right. There's
I could go on. Yeah.
And I think that's for some. There's still going to be money, and it's just I don't think it's going to be quite as free flowing. You need to be able to measure results, and everything you're doing should be producing these big data we're going to be talking about in 2013. It was sort of a story in the general tech world in 2012. It's going to be a big story in 2013 in the general tech world. It's going to be a big story in education as well. And so how do you tie these big data, and how are you using those to measure what students can achieve as a result of what you're doing? Are you improving their lives and their education?
This reminds me of a good blog post by Mark Suster at Both Sides of the Table. It's 2 years old, but already the headline says it, invest in lines, not in dots. So... yeah,
exactly.
And I hope there will be more lines than dots in education in 2013.
Sure hope so. Sure hope so.
Chris, do you want to plug anything? What is the next thing you are up to? Now is the time to sort of direct people to your activities.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely going to be refocusing some on my ZDNet education blog, so hopefully getting more posts up there, but also continuing to think about Google in general. So I have the Googling Google blog over on ZDNet as well, and those two things tend to come together quite an awful lot. So that's definitely on the table. Got a book that's been percolating for a long time, but I think it may finally be time to write a short ebook, at least on online education, because it's becoming so much more legitimate, partly because of MOOCs and partly because of the technology, and partly because many universities are accepting it. But there's a lot of value at K-12 for that, and so I think it'll be a K-12 focused online learning. It'll be a little ebook, but it's. I think the time has come for K-12 to really begin addressing it seriously. The university's been doing it for, almost 20 years now. But it's definitely time for K-12 to look at that. So this year it's online learning, it's platform, and I don't want to get myself a cool Windows tablet too. We'll see.
And as always, you can find Chris on Twitter. His handle is Mr. D at AHS, standing for high school. So Mr. D at AHS. And excellent. So we might be thinking of doing a little bit more on Google Plus as well, and maybe if Chris and I enjoy that, and some of you might actually want to join us, also having some live elements in review ed or our stories, because this is us, and of course our picks and some Twitter discussions and influencing our stories, of course, but having this live element and our audience could actually influence this a little bit more and have
Imagine
some...
how much longer we'd talk if we had an audience interacting.
Yeah, chat with us. So this might be something to try out and see if everybody likes it, and might be fun.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
All right. So everybody, I hope you liked that. We see to probably split this in different segments, so you don't have to watch the whole 90 minutes of Talking Heads. But it was a great pleasure as always. Valuable exchange and input, and I really like it as much as I did throughout the year, and let's continue doing this.
Agreed. Have a great new year, and hopefully talk to you very shortly.